And welcome back to Washington Commanders Insider. Today, we're going to be talking about NFL draft prospect Thor Griffith and why he might be a terrific late round selection for the Washington Commanders. Next up, we're going to look back at what Adam Peters had to say in the pre-draft press conference. One of the things that I forgot to mention yesterday that certainly has us excited for this upcoming season. And so before we go ahead and jump into it, I first want to remind you to hit that subscribe button, just like Jaden Daniels is going to be hitting many wide receivers for multiple touchdowns this upcoming season. And so in exchange for hitting that subscribe button, I'm going to give you nothing but daily content around the Washington Commanders. So make sure you hit that like, you hit that subscribe, and you join the Washington Commanders Insider family as we talk nothing but Washington Commanders football. And so with that being said, we are looking at another NFL draft prospect here. We are looking at Thor Griffith, defensive tackle. He finished his career with Louisville. He started off with Harvard. And so let's start with the reasons why I really like him. And so number one, I love the fact that he has a wrestling background. And so with that wrestling background, in the limited highlights that I saw, you can see a player that does well with the leverage. I think that he is a guy that can win the leverage battle, understanding what to do once he gets hit, and then also to what to do with his hands as far as getting momentum and then getting to a running back, right? And so I think that that is terrific. And point number one is that he has a wrestling background that absolutely helps him and I think translates to his football. And I think that that's something that certainly will carry into the National Football League. And so next up, the next thing that I love about him is that he's great against the run. This is something that has been written about him. This is also something, too, you can see in the limited highlight tapes as well, is that he is good against the run. And so what is the one thing that the Washington Commanders struggled with? It is stopping the run. And I love the fact that he's a defensive tackle. And so with a defensive tackle, look, he has a chance to be disruptive. So that means that even if he doesn't get the tackle, his ability to be disruptive and then also to keep, let's say, a Bobby Wagner or a Frankie Louvu or whoever else is behind him at the linebacker position relatively clean, then that allows them to make the play. And so remember, as a defense, yes, individually, you want some great performances, but generally you want the whole system to kind of click together. And so Thor Griffith, with his ability to be disruptive in the run game like that, I think that that would be huge for the Washington Commanders if they were to go in that direction. And so next up, I think another thing that I liked about him, and then I think some of the things in the limited, again, highlight tapes that I see and just reading about him is his power, right? I think that he has the ability with his first step to generate some power. And so once he comes off to that first step, I think he had some pretty good bend at a defensive tackle. And I think with that power, like he definitely is a guy that, look, whoever's trying to block him is going to feel that. And I think he's a guy also, too, that when he gets to the running back as well, you are going to feel that power. So I think that that is next. You have got to love the power that he generates from the defensive tackle position. And so next, I think another thing that I liked about him was his productivity. And so when you look at what he's done, across his time with Harvard and Louisville, started off slow as a freshman. He only had 2 total tackles. He had 1 solo, but he had 1 forced fumble. But the real production started in 2022. He had 46 total tackles. He had 24 solo. He had 22 assists, but he had 5 sacks. Then after that, his next season at Harvard, he had 55 total tackles. So his tackles went up. He had 25 solo. So he went up there, and he also had 30 assists as well. And then what I love is he came back with 3.5 sacks. And then his last season at Louisville, 19 total tackles, 13 solos. He had 6 assists. He had 3 sacks and a forced fumble. He also had a forced fumble in 2023. And so here's why I like that with the production, because one of the things that they talk about as a weakness in just looking at his NFL draft buzz profile is that maybe he's going to struggle as a pass rusher, but you see that he has the ability to get sacks. And I think that, as you get to the next level, I feel like just once the coaches kind of coach him up some more, you can take a guy that is natural at maybe being a run defender, and you can teach him a little bit more as far as giving him some more tools to be better as a pass rusher. And so I like the fact that you see that type of production in college. And I also love this. Look, transferring from Harvard over to Louisville, which means that he went against some tougher competition and he was still able to produce because he had 3.5 sacks the year before. He came back and he had 3 sacks the next season, and he also had a forced fumble. So you see that the production also went up with him going against more competition. So you love that. And then with the turnovers, I feel like that's an added bonus because anytime you talk about a defender that can force a fumble or create a turnover, that is huge. That's exactly what we saw in that Tampa Bay Buccaneers game that really was the difference for us in that playoff game. And then you know that was really the difference against the Philadelphia Eagles. Yes, you do give them credit, but we turned the football over. All right. And so that just lets you know how critical of a stat that is. And so those are some of the things that I love about him. Now, going into his weaknesses, again, I mean, you have to take this stuff with a grain of salt. And I think it is something where, every player coming into the National Football League, they have some weaknesses that they have to work on. And so, number one, I just talked about the fact that, yes, he has to get better as a pass rusher. That is for certain. Next up, they talk about maybe the limitations on him, and maybe there's going to be some specific defensive fronts that maybe he can only play in. And so you wonder about that from a scheme standpoint. Are you going to be able to get the max out of him that way? And then next, they talk about him being undersized. And so looking at him, just some of the things that they say here are just his statistics in ESPN. It says that he's 6'2", and he's listed as 320. And so I went over and I looked at Eddie Goldman, and he's listed at 6'3", 332. And so, I mean, there's not a whole bunch of difference there. Yes, you do have the size difference at the 6'2" to compared to Eddie Goldman, who's listed at 6'3", 332. Not bad. So I think that, look, for a guy that has a wrestling background, that understands how to be agile and can be definitely a disruptive player. And I think a guy that you can certainly play in different techniques, which is one of the things that they did talk about too in his NFL draft buzz profile, is here's a guy that can line up in many different techniques. And so you love the versatility here. And I'm just thinking that if the Washington Commanders were to get him in, a late round, you're getting a player that I think is probably going to be a rotational piece. And maybe that's what you need from him right now, because look, if you can throw multiple bodies at an offense, I think that is just as good as, say, like if you're on the offensive end and you're throwing, multiple types of packages and players in there, you eventually are just trying to wear down the defense. And I think it's the same thing with the defense on the offense. You want to be able to throw a guy in situational that can help you out. And so I think that maybe that might be what the Washington Commanders really need, because they've addressed a lot of stuff in free agency. And I think one of the things that Adam Peters is talking about is that this team is in a good position where, they can go out and make a pick, and maybe they're in a situation where they feel like, look, if it's a little bit more of a developmental project, which I think that this is probably what it is, you're thinking, okay, maybe I have the time for him to develop a little bit more. And so one of the things they did talk about too in his NFL draft buzz profile as well is that he ran a 4.57 pro shuttle time as well. So not bad when we're going back to that quickness here. And so anyway, let me know what you guys are thinking about Thor Griffith. And before we lastly get out of here, I wanted to talk about this pre-draft press conference here. And so this is one of the things that I forgot to mention really on yesterday's video. And that was just that one of the things that Adam Peters really leads with is that the Commanders, or the people who were sitting in the chair talking about the media, he was talking about that there was a lot of juice in the building because there was a big group that came back. And so I looked a little bit more, and the big group he's talking about is our veterans. And so you had, I guess, like Frankie Louvu, I think I saw Bobby Wagner, like just a lot of the players that were huge for us last season that don't have to be there are there. Like Deebo Samuel, he's been in the league obviously for quite some time, but you really have to get excited as a fan base when you see Jaden Daniels and all these veteran players coming back to voluntary workouts, because I think that really sets the tone going into next season. And that's why when we look at a prospect like a Thor Griffith, and if we have to draft a player like this that maybe you have to coach up a little bit more, when you have, your veteran players and players that are established, being one of the first in the building like that, I think that whoever you draft, that type of work ethic is going to really rub off on them. And I just think that the Commanders are in a terrific spot because if there is a player that needs to be coached up, I feel like that you're going to get some great habits here. And I feel like that our coaching staff, and just what we have in place just as a foundation, really as a team, is going to be enough to get the max out of that player. And so anyway, let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you feel like the Washington Commanders would make a major move like this, maybe late in the draft? Let me know too what you guys were thinking about here with this press conference with Adam Peters. Are you excited here for this upcoming season? Love to hear your thoughts. And before we jump out of here, I wanted to remind you to make sure that you stop by the channel on draft day, because we are going to be live streaming there. We're going to be doing the trade generator. We're going to be talking about prospects as they come off the board and get drafted. And just much like what we're doing today, just talking about that as we lead into what the Washington Commanders are going to do. Obviously picking in round one. Let's see if they end up trading out of the round or what they decide to do. But we're going to be talking about that leading into what the Washington Commanders are going to do. So if you want to hop onto the channel, we'll be here doing the NFL draft. And so as we always say, go Commanders, and I will see you guys on the next one. All right, peace.